fellow book lover, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kay if you're new here, and we love talking about clean and Christian fiction books on this side of BookTube. And today I'm going to be telling you about the 10 different books that I ended up reading in the month of June. So in the month of June, I was co-hosting a readathon called The Picnic in June with some friends that had birthdays in June along with me, and it was such a fun readathon to participate in. I kind of ended up mood reading a lot in June and then just fit them on the bingo board wherever I can. Before I get into all of the fiction books that I read, I want to start with the Bible studies and the Christian nonfiction book that I read. So a Bible study that I started and completed was Emmanuel, God with Us from Eden to Eternity. This was through the Daily Grace Co. In the A Picnic in June readathon, one of the prompts was doing a Bible study, and so I ended up starting and finishing this. This was a 4-week study and it was really good. I really enjoy things from the Daily Grace Co. I would say this wasn't my absolute favorite one, and I think because a lot of the themes of Emmanuel were really similar to the Advent study that I just did with them in December, but it was still a really good study and a great way to remember what Jesus really did for us when he came to be with us. It is such a beautiful, beautiful thing that God did, and so it was really good to have these reminders in the middle of the year. And I know I say it in every video where I talk about the Daily Grace Co, but I do have a coupon code with them. This video was not sponsored. They didn't send me this and tell me to do a video on it. Use code Kay's Library at checkout for 10% off of your order. It stacks on top of sales and you can use it as many times as you want, and it does help me and my family out a little bit in return. So anyway, I just really enjoy the Daily Grace Co, and I'm glad that I did do this study. Again, just great reminders about God really being a present God, God being one who reaches out towards his children and wants to dwell with them. The next study I guess I did, this isn't quite a study, it's more of a prayer journal, but I finally finished it this month, and it was a prayer journal on forgiveness from Crossway. It is literally just so incredibly beautiful. This is a 6-week journal. Every single week you get a new topic to focus on. So for forgiveness, the topics were the character of God, extraordinary forgiveness, an example of forgiveness, reconciliation, the command to forgive, and forgiveness lived out. And each week you went over different passages that you really just focused on and prayed over, and then it kind of leads you and gives you a little bit of a prayer prompt or something to think about to then pray over what you learned that day. So it's kind of like a devotional that has a page for prayer right next to the devotional. I really enjoyed this. This is my second one of these prayer journals that I have completed, and I will absolutely be doing more by them. They're just a wonderful tool to add to your Bible study that also just helps you grow in your faith, but then focus your prayer on something a little different than just once in life, if that makes sense. I really enjoy these. Now, the Christian nonfiction book that I ended up reading was Let Me Be a Woman by Elizabeth Elliot, and this was such a gem to have found. I didn't give this a full 5-star only because I think I would have appreciated reading this book if I had read it before I got married. If you know a Christian woman that is going to be getting married or is soon to be engaged or something like that, I would really recommend gifting her this book, because this book, it is 49 letters or short notes that Elizabeth Elliot wrote personally to her daughter before her daughter got married. Just going over how God designed women, what our role is, so to speak. And I know that sounds weird, but she just did such a phenomenal job just talking about embracing God's role for you as a woman. And so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I think I would have appreciated it more at another time in life, but I'm so glad that a book like this exists. And I will be gifting this book to any women that I know that end up getting married from here on out, because it was just that good, and I think it could be really impactful for them. Moving on to the fiction books that I read. I finally finished Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, so my time in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is now complete. I am not going to tell you what this is about because I frankly don't feel like I need to, but I do want to say this book redeemed a lot of the series for me, because you guys know, if you've been following my channel, I have not been enjoying Lord of the Rings as much much as I thought I would. The Hobbit is like a #1 favorite. And then book 6 in this. So if you didn't know, The Fellowship of the Ring is technically books 1 and 2. Two Towers is book 3 and 4. And The Return of the King is book 5 and 6. And book 6 is my second favorite behind The Hobbit. And maybe it's because that's where all the redemption and stuff happens, but the character growth that was towards the end of this, and being able to see some of these characters have a happily ever after. There were some bittersweet endings, but all in all, the ending of this was so beautiful. It'll probably be a long time before I pick up this series again, but I could see myself reading The Hobbit again. I'm so glad I did read this. I'm so glad I got to read this with my Christian and clean reading community. It just made it a much better and endurable experience being able to read this with them. So this is the last time on my channel you will be seeing anything about The Lord of the Rings. So you can say bye-bye because we're done for now. And you know, I think it's okay. I think it's a needed break. The next book that I read in June, and this was one that I read from May to June. I finished it in June. The Legends of Nesher by Cheney Hobson. This is the second book in the Secrets of Avigdor series. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. And this series is just such a ride. I can't explain to you what the second book is about without giving away spoilers and things like that. But this is, I've said it before, Christian fantasy, beautiful allegory, beautiful, beautiful faith moments. But then you also have pirates and dinosaurs. And the romance is really sweet. And honestly, this is a romance that I feel like could be really good if you have a teenage daughter. I don't know if this is technically young adult or adult, but the way that the woman in this is very firm in her faith, and she puts her faith before her feelings, is something that is just to be admired. This second book was like a lot. Like a lot stuff kept happening to them. I cried quite a few times in this one, but it was so super duper good, and I can't wait for the third book to come out whenever that is. The last fantasy book that I read in June, I don't need to keep talking about this too much, but I do want to say, Reviving Embers by Paige Reed, best book I've read all year. Adult Christian romantasy. I would not recommend this one for teenagers, but I did a whole video review on this. I go into the content and all of that stuff, and I would really encourage you to watch that video if you need any kind of content warnings or things like that, especially when it comes to the romance in this book. There isn't anything inappropriate in it, but I do think some people might be sensitive to it. This is a Christian fantasy romance, and the romance is kind of like heavier towards the 80% mark towards the end. It definitely is there throughout the book. This is a non-magic fantasy. It takes place in its own world with its own history, but it also has Bible history in it. And honestly, I really like the way that the author did that, because this is a book, if I'm being honest, if somebody is hesitant about giving up books that they are feeling convicted about because they really love romantasy and things like that, this is a book that I would hand them first, because it just has so much beautiful depth in it, and it's so good. Like, I don't really know what else to say. This book is basically a story about the government that says Christians are keeping them from being able to progress. So they want to get rid of all of the histories, the Bible histories, that kind of stuff. And so there's kind of this revolution going on where the common people that aren't in the government are really fighting to keep their rights, to keep their traditions and things like that. And it's really, really beautiful. Like I said, I highly encourage you to go watch my video where I go into all of the details. It's so good. So good. Okay, the next book that I read was The Lumberjack from the Cabin Next Door, and I actually buddy read this with my friend Amanda at Book Lover Amanda, because we both ended up buying each other this book for our birthdays. So we decided to buddy read it, and it was just really fun to read this with her. So in this book, you are following, what's her name? Kate, whose aunt passes away and leaves her cabin. But in order for Kate to actually be able to accept the cabin, she has to complete a bucket list of items where her aunt is basically trying to set her up with Eli, who is the lumberjack from the cabin next door, and he decides that he is going to help her with the bucket list. And this is a Christian rom-com. I will say there were some beautiful, beautiful faith themes, quotes, and moments in this book. It definitely had the most faith content out of any Christian rom-com that I've read before, so I did really appreciate that. There were some like faith things that I didn't totally agree with, but you know, it's one of those things. It's like tomatoes, tomatoes. This book has some moments that literally are going to live rent-free in my brain because it is quite literally the funniest laugh out loud book that I have ever read. So there were lots of good things that I really loved about this, but this book, it missed for me in a couple of other places, and I don't want to be too critical because I know this is some people, like they've said it's their favorite rom-com they've ever read, but I unfortunately really struggled with the author's writing. Every other sentence was a metaphor of some sort, and they did not always make sense. I'm gonna read a couple of them to you, not to be petty, but just to kind of like giggle with you guys, because there were some things I just was like, what made this woman write this sentence? Because it literally made no sense. So there were parts of it that I think the writing could use a lot of work. It was something that became very redundant and annoying, and it was something that I had to really take my time with it because it's like one of those books I could only take in small doses before I would get annoyed with the author's writing style. So unfortunately, that was just something that didn't work for me. This was very insta-lovey, like super insta-lovey. My other issue with this is it seemed like all of the characters were like the same. They all fought the same, they all talked the same. Even there was like the storyline between her and her mom, and they had some reconciliation, and that was like a beautiful part of the story. Was it realistic? No, but it was really beautiful. But even like when her mom would say really mean things, like she talked exactly like all of the other characters. So I just felt like there was no variation between the characters. Like I wouldn't have been able to tell them apart, if that makes sense. So I just had some issues with the writing itself, but I do think this could be worth the read for you. It's not one that I'm going to read again, and honestly I don't know that I'll read something else by this author just because I really struggled with her writing. If you want a Christian rom-com, I do think it is a beautiful Christian rom-com. Now let me open my Goodreads just so I can read you a couple of the metaphors that just kind of threw me through a loop, and maybe you can help me understand what she was trying to say. Every other sentence in this book was basically a metaphor, so maybe it was like I was so exhausted from reading them that these just weren't making sense to me. So if you can explain any of them to me, please enlighten me. Metaphor number 1 at the 48% mark. I only started highlighting some of them. This is on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm just going to share like 3 examples with you. But 48% mark. Eli packed like a man proposing to the concept of preparedness. Eli packed like a man proposing to the concept of preparedness. I just read that like 12 times and I was like, what does this even mean? This one is very questionable. 58%. She hugged the bag like a teddy bear you could bite. Who is biting teddy bears? Unless you're like a toddler, but like that was such an odd comparison to me. What does that even mean? One more. This is 67% mark. Night folded itself over the windows early, the way it does in a cozy city that eats time for appetizers. What does that mean? What does that mean? I feel like I'm starting to get really mean. I don't want to be mean because it was a good book. Just parts of this, I was like, come on, Emily, come on. Okay. We're done talking about the lumberjack. The next book that I read was But He's My One Regret by Annah Conwell. This is the second book in the Carter Brothers series by her. But He's My Grumpy Neighbor is book 1. And this one was so good. You are following a character named Levi, which is the Carter brother, and then you're following Dahlia. So Levi and Dahlia, they met 5 years in the past on a beach vacation. They didn't exchange any personal information, but they basically fell in love. And 5 years later, he is a detective and she gets a job, ironically, as the therapist of his precinct. And so this is like a forbidden workplace romance. Like they really can't be together. She's a therapist and he has the potential for being her patient. And there's just a lot of intricacies within this book. There is a grief thread through this because they have both lost parents. I really, really am enjoying this series. I can't wait to read the other brothers' stories. They are lighthearted. They are funny. Annah Conwell is a Christian, but there's no faith threads through these. These are just just really good and clean and quick. There have been several members in the Salt and Light Reader Society that have also read these, and we all just like binge them so fast because they're just so good. The story keeps moving, they're very engaging, and they're just lighthearted and fun. This is going to be like my comfort rom-com series when I just want a lighthearted modern day rom-com. They are just so much fun. The next two books that I read, I actually only have one of them, volumes 1 and 2 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. I am sorry to say, but I am not a huge fan after the first two books, but hear me out. I think I'm going to give this series another shot next year because right now I'm in the middle of a couple different Regency series, which I'll talk about here in a minute. This other author is just like way up there for me. So reading like a Victorian era at the same time as this other series I'm so emotionally invested in, I just really didn't care about this. And I listened to the audiobooks because everybody's like, the audiobooks are amazing. Don't mistake in my words. The audiobooks are very, very good. Very well done. But it was one of those things that I just kind of listened to the first two and I was like, did I miss something? Because I feel like nothing happened. So this is about a girl who comes home and she inherits her family's estate that's in financial ruin. That is the only thing I can tell you about Emma M. Lyon after the first two books. And I know people say the story gets better as you go, but I think it's one that I need to sit down and physically read because I feel like I may have missed some things. I may have missed funny moments. The characters were fun, but I just like didn't care. After the second book, I just still was like, I'm truly just not invested. There are other Regency romance books that I'm way more invested in. And so I think this is going to take a seat on the back burner. I'm going to try again. I really will because everybody says, of all people they know, that I would love this series. So I will try again. Please don't be offended if you love this series. I just don't care yet. I might care one day. So I will try again, I promise you. The final two books that I read were actually part of that other series, The Kiss of a Stranger and Friends and Foes, both by Sarah M. Eden. This is kind of the prequel and then book 1 of the John Quill Brothers series. I am loving this family, the John Quill brothers. I don't even know what to say. Like, Sarah M. Eden, her books are so humorous, but also very heartfelt. There are lots of like heavy themes that her characters go through, but she does it in a way that it doesn't feel overpowering or like it's insufferable. They're pretty quick reads. They're usually like 220 pages or less, and I just really enjoy her Regency romances. So in The Kiss of a Stranger, Crispin and Catherine get caught in the midst of a scandal, and her uncle forces Crispin to marry Catherine. So in this story, you see that Catherine is like a very timid woman. Like, she's terrified of everything, and you quickly learn that's because she has had an extremely abusive upbringing under her uncle's guardianship. Some people, I feel like, could read this and just be really annoyed with Catherine because there is not talking to each other, there is some miscommunication in here, and there is all of these things that some people might not like. But knowing her background and the story and the place she came from, she's like terrified of men. She's so scared she's going to do or say the wrong thing and be physically hit. That is one thing. There is physical abuse of a woman in this book. It makes sense knowing her character and where she comes from. So although there was miscommunication in this, I definitely let it slide. But this was just a beautiful story about her finding freedom in her marriage with Crispin, and I just really, really loved it and appreciated the story that Sarah M. Eden told in this book. Then we have Friends and Foes. Friends and Foes. This was an interesting one. You're following the Earl of Lambton, which is Philip John Quill, and he presents himself as a dandy. And if you don't know what a dandy is in the Regency era, it is a man who puts tons, what's the word, vanity over his appearance. So he's always talking about the latest fashions that he's wearing and all of this stuff and trying to put on this facade that he is a true dandy. Well, secretly, he's actually a spy for the English government. So that's a facade that he puts on because he's a spy trying to help his country, and people would never think a conceited, vain dandy would be like that. He is trying to capture this French spy who could hurt a lot lot of people. And then you are following Sorrel, and Sorrel was a really interesting character. So she is like a very grumpy woman, but she actually had an incident several years prior where she actually lost function to one of her legs. It was completely deformed and she has chronic pain. So that was something really interesting to read about, this character with chronic pain, how this really impacts her. It was fascinating. And so Philip and Sorrel, they get invited to a house party at, you guessed it, Crispin and Catherine's home, and that's where they meet. And they start off on a horrible foot. They do not like each other and they're in a war. And it's so funny. It is so cute. If I'm being honest, I was hoping for more action on the spy front of this because I thought that was a really cool plot line, but really there wasn't too much of the spy stuff in it, but it was a plot line because it was part of Philip's identity. I just wish there was more. All in all, I really enjoyed this story. I enjoyed both of these and just the representation that it showed for both of these women, one with chronic pain and the other kind of like leaving an abusive situation. They're lighthearted, but they're also deep and meaningful. So Sarah M. Eden, I'm going to continue through this series through the end of the year and hopefully finish it, but it's just so good and I just love it so much. If you made it this far in the video, could you please leave me an emoji of your favorite flower in the comment section? If you would also let me know what was your favorite book that you read in June, I'd love to know and hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because that helps the internet know that there are people looking for clean and Christian books, and that would just help YouTube push it out to the right people, so I would really appreciate that. And as always, I hope you have an absolute blessed week, and I will see you next time. Bye!